Hey everybody, Zach here. So glad to have you back with us. I'm standing over here by our resource table. I want to let you guys know we're entering into summer. There's going to be more time. Maybe you're bored and you want something to do, and maybe you've watched too much Netflix. And so I just want you to know that we have resources and things for you to read to help you grow spiritually this summer, as well as over at this table we have a calendar of events that we're going to be doing that you can take home so you can always know of all the fun things that we're going to be doing this summer. So I look forward to seeing you this summer. I look forward to all the fun things we're going to do. Let's start with the final message of the school year. All right, so here we are, final message for this school year, the 2020 to 2021 school year. What a crazy year it's been. So much just, doing this and getting in, and we hope that this message leaves you well. But we've been talking about the book of Song of Songs, and the Song of Songs is an incredibly interesting book because it's about two lovers back in the ancient day, and they're talking about each other and they're using all this stuff. And it's really quite a funny book. Let's just call it what it is. It's actually quite humorous to see what they're saying, because if you really break down what they're talking about, it's something that you would not even think about talking and telling somebody today, right? So you think of like this verse right here that says, even among 60 queens and 80 concubines and countless young women, I would still choose my dove, my perfect one, the favorite of her mother, dearly loved by the one who bore her. You see, at this point, the guy is saying, and he's telling the woman, of all the women I could have, of all the wives that I have, of all the girlfriends I have, of all the women I could be sleeping with, I choose you, baby. Right? Like, how crazy is that? Like, imagine my wife is like, man, you look handsome today. And I'm like, hey, of all the women out there that I could be with, still choose you. Like, who says that kind of stuff, right? It's such a weird book because you have to take into account culture. You have to take account into the time that it was written and just all the different things that were going on back then. But there's so much stuff that we can pull from it. You see, the first week we talked about Solomon. We talked about kind of the background of like what this book is. And then last week we talked about the nature of love. What is love? And then we talked about three words that they used. The first one was ahaba, which means commitment. The second one was raya, which is friendship. And the third one is dad, which is physical love. And so we looked at how love isn't just, the physical component of it, but it's also a friendship. And it's also just the nature of being able to commit to that person that you say that you love. And so tonight what we're going to do is we're going to look at the wisdom that can be found in the book of Song of Songs. So let's continue on in chapter 2. This is what it says, starting in verse 1. I am the spring crocus blooming on the Sharon plain, the lily of the valley. So what you have to know, like a little context here, is she's saying, I'm just a basic flower. I'm just a common flower. There's nothing special about me. Verse 2, he says, like a lily among thistles is my darling among young women. He says, no, you're not just a normal flower. All of them are weeds. They're gross. They're nasty, but you stick out. You are incredibly beautiful, and just like that flower, there is no comparison. She follows us up in verse 3, and she says, like the finest apple tree in the orchard is my lover among young men. You see, apples were considered to be an erotic fruit. And so she's clearly making some sort of note or some sort of connotation here, right? Later she says, I sit in his delightful shade and I taste of his delicious fruit. And I'm just going to give you guys a spoiler. She ain't talking about, literal fruits and vegetables here, right? She's clearly making a metaphor, but let's move on. She says, he escorts me to the banquet hall. It's obvious how much he loves me, right? Some translations say his banner over me is love. And basically what she's saying is that he is loyal to her. She says, strengthen me with raisin cakes, refresh me with apples, for I am weak with love. Both raisins and apples, not only erotic fruits, but they're also considered to be aphrodisiacs, which, for a lack of a better term, kind of gets the motor going. It's kind of a fuel that kind of gets things going. So what she's saying is pressure is cooking, right? You're giving me raisins, you're giving me apples. Things are about to explode. She's ready for physical love. Verse 6, his left arm is under my head and his right arm embraces me. And you're probably reading this and you're going, whoa, because we know where this is going. And she halts on the brakes and she completely stops. And in verse 7, she says this, promise me, O women of Jerusalem, by the gazelles and the wild deer, not to awaken love until the time is right. This whole entire book up to this point, they're complimenting each other. They're talking about each other. They're chasing each other. There's this delight. There's this energy. There's this friendship. There's this love. There's this flirtation. And it's all leading to this moment. And everything is crescendoing. And it goes right here. And then comes a warning. Promise me, O women of Jerusalem, by the gazelles and the wild deer, not to awaken love until the time is right. Isn't that interesting? Why does she just stop? Well, if we think of Song of Songs, whether we think that Solomon actually wrote it, or maybe it was a poem that was written in the style of the poems of Solomon's time, we associate Solomon with wisdom. In fact, God's like, hey, you're going to be king. Name it. It's yours. And he says, I want to be wise. I want to be the wisest king that ever existed. And so God gives him wisdom. And whether he wrote this or not, we're not going to talk about that now because we've already chatted about that. But Solomon is associated with wisdom. In fact, the book of Proverbs, we know, was penned by him, which is all about wisdom and its ways and different sentences and sayings and things in order to make people more wise. But then also the book of Ecclesiastes, which is about, from the perspective of Solomon as an old man, looking back on the meaning of life. So Solomon is known for his wisdom, and the Song of Songs provides us with something incredibly wise here, to not just jump straight into love because it feels good, but to wait and to hold out and not awaken it until the time is right. You see, one thing that I want to make sure that we know is that when it comes to this idea of love, sex, and dating, and going about it slow, going about it patiently, and going about it God's ways, is directly in conflict to what the world will tell you to do. And here's why. Because it's fun, it's exciting, there's energy there, right? We've just read about all of the good stuff that happens in Song of Songs 1 leading into this verse. And so there's something that's really just fun about it. And why would we not want to have fun? Let's just go out and pursue fun. And here's why. Because God knows there's consequences to fun. Oftentimes we think, oh, that won't happen to me. It'll be fine. It'll like nothing bad could possibly happen to me. And we think that we're immortal or we're above God's ways. And one statement that I say all the time, and I have to remind myself of it all the time, is that God's ways are better than our ways always. And that's one of the things that I live by. God's ways are better than our ways always. And he warns us all the time throughout Scripture. He doesn't tell us to not do things because he's anti-fun and anti-exciting or anti-happy life. He tells us not to do those things because he knows the consequences that follow. And so she's saying, this is wonderful, this is amazing, this is great, but you have to wait until the time is right. And when it comes to that idea, it's not our intentions, but our actions that are going to get us there. It's not our intentions, but our actions. One story I love to share, this probably won't be the last time you hear it, as my wife when she was younger. And my wife has a terrible sense of direction, and her and her friend were getting ready to go to Kings Island, which is like to the southeast of us. And from her house, it's almost directly east. And so she, just like her and her friend loaded up, they got in a car and they zipped out to go to Kings Island. And they got lost. And my wife was like, well, Kings Island is east, so let's just keep driving east. And they kept driving and driving and driving. And guess what? They never made it to Kings Island. Why? Because eventually they went so far east that they didn't realize that they had to turn south to head to Kings Island. You see, her intentions were, let's go to Kings Island. But her actions said, let's get lost. And I think so many times our intentions are good. But it's not our intentions that determine, what's going to happen. It's the direction that we're heading. It's the actions that we choose to do. You see, we need to build good habits in order to create discernment so we know what to avoid and how to avoid it. Proverbs 22 says this. It says, a prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions, but the simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. And so Solomon gives us these two people to compare ourselves to, right? The wise person, the prudent person, the wise person, the smart person, and then the fool, or the simpleton, or let's just call it the dum-dum, right? Do you want to be the wise person? Do you want to be the dum-dum? Because a wise person, he foresees danger and he takes precaution. The wise person, the prudent person, they look ahead, they forecast, they ask, what's going to happen if I do this? Right? What are going to be the consequences of this? They realize that for every single action, there's a reaction, right? There's a consequence to it. We can't just be immune to these things. And so they pause, they stop, they reflect, and they say, hey, let's see if there's anything dangerous here. Okay? The dum-dum just jumps into it blindly and just goes, and they think that it's going to be fine, and they suffer the consequences. You see, God challenges us, hey, think through what you're going to do, because there are consequences to that. And so let's say that you want to have a healthy relationship, you want to have a healthy marriage, you want to have a fantastic physical sex life, you want to have all of these things within the context that God wants for you. Well, then let me ask you a question. Do your actions show that? Are your actions pushing you towards that end game and that goal? One question that Pastor Andy Stanley down in Atlanta says is, are you the person that the person you're looking for is looking for? I'm going to say that again. Are you the person that the person you're looking for is looking for? You want to get married? You want a spouse? Are you the person that they'll want to marry? That's a great question, right? Because now it's a matter of asking ourselves, are we the ones who could be holding us back from this? And is my actions, worthy of having a spouse, right? Or having a significant other? Am I going to pursue that? So let me ask you this question. Do you want to be the person that your spouse is looking for? Do you want to be the person? Do you want to be that person? Well, let me just tell you a couple of things that you probably need to do, okay? Here's just some steps you can take away. The first one is learn to keep commitments now so you can so you can become someone who keeps their commitments later. You see, I believe that commitments is a discipline in and of itself. It's something that we're not naturally good at. It's why Jesus had to say, hey, let your yes be yes and your no be no, because people are bad about it. In fact, I had a friend in high school, and we would invite him to things. He'd be like, oh yeah, man, I'll be there. It's going to be great. And he would never show. We'd go out to lunch. Hey, dude, you coming with us? Oh yeah, man, I wouldn't miss it for the world. Never shows. Hey, dude, we're going to have this video game night. You want to come over? Oh yeah, man, what time is it? Oh, it's at like 8 o'clock. I'll be there. Never showed. You know what we stopped doing? Inviting him to things. Why? Because he couldn't commit to anything. And maybe you know people like that. Maybe you are a person like that who just doesn't keep commitments. So learn to keep commitments now. Make small commitments, whether it's serving in church, or maybe it's a specific goal that you want to get done this summer. Maybe it's something like a habit that you want to build into your life. And keep it small, keep it tiny. And eventually, if you learn to keep the tiny commitments, eventually you'll be able to keep the bigger ones later on, because you'll know the discipline of being able to keep a commitment. The second thing is confront your past. It's impossible to move forward without acknowledging what's behind you, right? And so if you've made a mistake, if you've screwed up, then just know this: that's going to be a part of you. But that doesn't determine what your future can be, right? In the same way that a speeding ticket in your past doesn't keep you from being a good driver in the future, in the same kind of way, a slip up in the past, something that we've done, some sort of sin, is not going to keep us from being able to recommit to God's ways now. And so you might have to confront your past, but just know that the future is bright and there can always be a difference. Third, learn to view people the way that God does. What does our world tell you how to look at people, right? As flesh, as looks. You know, we get so caught up in the physical aspects of things, or maybe their interests, right? Oh, they have to like this, they have to be blah, blah, blah. And God's like, no, they're way more than that, right? You can't just view people based upon how the world judges them. You have to look at them for who they are, because man sees outward appearance, but God sees the heart. And he sees them as children of God, and he calls us to do the same thing too. And so before you think about them physically, before you think about them like in that kind of way, learn to look at them in the way, in the eyes that their Heavenly Father looks at them. And I'm telling you, the way you treat people is going to be different based on how you do that. And then lastly, postpone the physical commitment of your dating relationship as long as possible. I'm going to quote Andy Stanley again, who says, when you give up something now for something better later, that's not, a sacrifice. It's an investment. In the same kind of way that my wife and I will go through a period of time where we store away money, where we don't go out to eat as much, where we save and we save and we save, because we know that later something bad is probably going to happen. Something's going to happen with the car, something's going to happen with the house, inevitably something is going to happen, and it's going to cost a lot of money. Okay? And while that always hurts, while it always hurts to be like, oh, fix my car, and I'm handing the check over, while that always hurts, it hurts a whole lot less when you have a whole lot more money invested in it, right? In the same kind of way, when we postpone the physical component of the dating relationship as long as possible, what we're doing is we are investing in the long haul. We're investing in that long game relationship to see what God has in store for us. And me and my wife did this. We got called archaic. We got called old-fashioned, right? We got called fuddy-duddies. We got called boring. We had people commenting all up and down, telling us that we were wrong. But we stuck to it because we believe that God's ways are better than our ways. Always. And it's led to some really fun just in our marriage, because it's more than just a physical component. It's a friendship. It's a commitment. It's all the expressions of love that the Song of Songs offers. And we believe that God has something incredible in store for us. And I believe that he has something in store for you too. You see, the Song of Solomon, the entire book points to this idea of wisdom, to not awaken love until the time is right. And if we embrace this, our lives, our relationships, and our marriages are going to be so much richer. And I hope the same is true for you.